All right, so we are going to talk about health communication in crisis or emergency. Um, there are a lot of examples that I will use in this presentation that relate to uh, the COVID-19 pandemic and how different actors responded. So that's why I decided to use that picture. Uh, when we had the COVID-19 pandemic, there are a lot of lessons that we learned from how different organizations, different people communicated. Um, so in this presentation, you'll be able to know what crisis health communication is and what are its key principles and challenges, and then what are the key stakeholders in crisis communication and what are their roles and responsibilities. We'll look at how you can plan, implement, and evaluate crisis health communication campaigns, and then you'll be able to understand issues to do with ethics, cultural sensitivity, and the evidence-based practices in health communication, especially in crisis scenarios. So we all know that we can have uh, health crises that can arise from a number of issues. Okay, we can have crises that emerge uh, okay, just trying to admit that emerge from communicable diseases, outbreak, can have crises that emerge from natural disasters such as flooding. Why this is disturbing me? Just a minute. Okay. Yeah, natural disasters like floods, pollution, maybe nuclear spillage or leakage, foodborne illnesses. We had Ebola, we had COVID-19. So these are the examples of health crises that can really happen. Anyone with a question? Are we all together?
Yeah, you are clear, sir.
Yes,
We are okay for now.
there.
All right. Yes. So you can mute. So risk communication is when you exchange information, advice, and opinions between experts, community leaders, government officials, and the general public at large about who is at risk and basically what needs to be done. Okay. When we talk about risk communication, the focus is mainly on potential risks or hazards that can happen in situations that may not necessarily be emergency situation. For example, recently we had a boat that had gallons of oil that it capsized in River Nile, and then the water bottling companies did not really communicate to the public about this, and then continue to use that water to and supplied people with water that had elements of oil. Um, so, of course, people um, raised complaints on social media, and that is when now the bottling company actually now responded and said, yes, we know about this, but we try to take these steps. Okay, so risk communication is about communicating about risks and hazards that are happening and may not necessarily be in emergency situations. But sometimes there is no clear distinction in terms of real practice between emergency risk communication and basically risk communication as in real practice. But if we have an emergency, for example, when we had COVID-19, there was lockdown, people were scared. That kind of communication is what we call emergency risk communication. So that communication that happens during a public health emergency to inform and protect the public is emergency risk communication. So risk communication is not very easy. It is quite challenging because of many factors. Health communication as a field itself is actually new. It's not a field that you can say has been in existence for a long time. So it means that we really continuously learn about how to communicate about issues in health. Uh, Continuously, it is a continuous process. More evidence is being gathered, more principles are being put forward, how we can do risk communication. So risk communication is quite challenging. Why? Because sometimes you really have scant information about the health problem that is actually happening, yet you really need to communicate. So you are not very sure what is happening and what are you going to communicate about. For example, what happened during COVID-19 is that the cause of COVID-19 was at first disputed. How it spread from one person to another was at first disputed. So if you are not very sure of how someone catches COVID-19, then what are you really going to communicate? So it's quite challenging. And then the other thing is you want to communicate about a risk, but the public may not really be aware of the gravity of the risk that you're communicating about. So you want to make sure that people are aware of the risk and then they take appropriate action. But the reality is that people don't see, or the public don't see that risk. Okay? I mean, you need to make sure that people have to believe, they have to trust you. So you need to be a credible person. So that trust is very important to build. Okay? So it's one of the challenging things to build. And then you need to communicate in time. Okay? Communicate in time or rapidly and effectively during an emergency. You don't delay. When you delay, you create a room for rumors. That's the problem. And then the other issue is that it's very hard to make decisions on what really to communicate because you have information overload. You have a lot of information really that you have on your desk. And sometimes you have contrasting information from experts. Okay? From experts. How do you navigate that? It's a challenge. But also, communicating to people can be overly overwhelming emotionally because, like for example, what we had in COVID-19 is that there was a lot of fear and anxiety. in the public, especially when the number of deaths were actually increasing. So coming up and face these people and talk to them um, can be draining for the person who is going to talk to people. You're going to talk to a family that has lost 5 family members because of COVID. You're addressing a nation which has 1 million people dying because of COVID-19 in a very short period. So it has emotional impact. So if you saw what happened across the world, it was the presidents actually addressing the nation almost every other day. In UK, we had the Boris Johnson participating in briefing the nation on what is happening. In Uganda, you had President Museveni addressing people every week. And then in South Sudan, we had at least a press release every day from the Ministry of Health. Okay? So communicating to people during crisis can be overwhelming emotionally. Okay? The other thing is that you're talking about a very big problem, and you really need to make sure that you meet the expectation of all key stakeholders. So the stakes are high. Okay, the stakes are high. There is no room for errors. Okay, there's no room for errors because your communication has the ability to mislead the population, and that misleading will have consequences on people's lives. Remember in the first days of COVID when Donald Trump said that is a Chinese virus. A statement like that can be quite damaging. Okay, so that means that people may not really take the precautions because the president has said it is a Chinese flu. So that means that you need to know about crafting risky messages, emergency risk messages. You all remember during COVID-19, when you try to dial a number using your phone, you will hear that message about COVID-19. I think the same thing also happened when we received the SMSs from the telecom companies about what we can do if we suspect someone to be having Ebola. So for you to be able to craft those messages, you don't craft them from the blue. You use the theories and frameworks and models. You need to choose the appropriate one that works for you. That means you need to choose a framework that fits the health risk communication message. So the first theory that we are going to look at is the social amplification of risk framework. Okay, so with this, we are looking at what are the social and psychological factors that amplify or mitigate risk perceptions during emergencies. What are the things that make the population to actually take precautions? Okay, so we look at those social and the psychological factors. If we know those drivers, then we can craft our messages in that line. So usually, of course, we know that media, what is in the media, influences, rumors influence, public reactions, okay, can influence, the celebrities influence. So you need to understand how information about certain risk factors disseminated or amplified, and then you can use that to develop your messages. So that is the social amplification of risk framework. It's one of those frameworks that you can really use. And then we have the protection motivation theory, which focuses on individuals' motivation to protect themselves from perceived risks. People will always take protective measures if they believe that the threat is severe. Okay, if you remember the health belief model, which is also similar to this, which has concepts to do with perceived severity, perceived susceptibility. The COVID-19 pandemic or the virus had the fatality rate was very high for elderly people compared to young adults. So it is it is actually expected that the young adults could be more reluctant to protect themselves about from COVID-19, because COVID-19 amongst young adults was not highly fatal. Okay, so people who are young and they had no underlying condition, it is very hard to tell them to protect themselves against COVID-19. But the elderly who even had the underlying conditions could take more precautions. So that is about the protection motivation theory. The health belief model is actually related to what I've just talked about. It has constructs like perceived susceptibility, severity, benefits, barriers, and choose to action. This is to say that the person will adopt behaviors in relation to what they think about the condition. That is, if the condition is very severe, then they are most likely going to take action. If they believe that they can get the condition, which is perceived susceptibility, then they may take action. And then the beliefs, the benefits of taking action and the barriers for taking action, and they choose to action. So all the things, you have to consider them in crafting your message. The other theory is about the extended parallel process model, which explains how individuals respond to fear-inducing messages. If perceived fear is high, if people fear the condition highly, then it is likely that they will actually respond and engage in precautionary measures or actions. But the other ethical issue that you will have is that you don't want to instill a lot of fear in people. You need to make a balance between making people realize that there is actually a threat and that they need to take action. Okay, so your message should not overly instilling fear amongst people. And then another theory is what we call the diffusion of innovations theory, which is about you need to understand that people go through different stages of adopting new behaviors or ideas. So if there is a threat, not all people will actually realize that there is a threat and take it seriously. So it means that when you're crafting this message, you need to understand the people that you're crafting this message for. Are these the people that have heard about the risk before, or they have not heard? Or are they people that have heard but have not taken action? Okay, so you need to to tailor your message according to different segments of the population based on their readiness to adopt protective measures. And then in the next theory is the communication and accommodation theory, which is basically focusing on how people adjust their communication styles based on social norms and expectations. This actually tells you that culture, social norms play a role in what people understand from your message. So it means your communication has to be in line with the audiences in terms of their social norms. The tone, the language that you use should resonate with the audience. And then we have the crisis emergency risk communication model, which was developed by the CDC, which is the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. It's a framework that you can really use for developing effective risk communication during emergencies. The emphasis is on transparency, empathy, and promoting action to address public concerns and facilitating behavioral change. So this is how it looks like. Before the crisis happens, you need to be very prepared. So you need to know who will communicate what and when, and what messages do we really need to have. That is before the crisis happens. And then we move to the next step. When the crisis is now starting, you need to acknowledge that the crisis is actually happening. That means that at that point you need to educate and inform the population, and then determine or choose the person who will be the lead communicator, the spokesperson. Okay? And that means that that person should be a credible person. So credibility is very important. And then provide emergency course of action. Who will do what and when and where. Okay? Make sure that the communication is continuous. Okay, so that is the maintenance part. You address issues that can be arising. You provide more detailed information. You try to understand what the public is, how the public is responding. You need to listen to the public, the stakeholders. And if there are any misinformation, you correct. And continuously update your key recommendations. And then, as the crisis is coming to an end, of course, you start to see what is going, what went, how you try to do things. Actually, the crisis emergency risk communication model developed by the CDC followed them reflecting on how they have been handling previous outbreaks. Okay, so that means that when the dust is settling, you need to look at how you have been doing your things, evaluate, make adjustments, make what are the lessons learned. It's very, very important. So the last one that we shall look at is the proceed model. This is also used in health promotion. It is used in different public health initiatives. So you will not only see it only in health communication and health promotion. If you have any other public health initiative or intervention, you can use this model. It has two phases: the precede and then the proceed phase. Precede, each letter actually stands for a word. Okay, so precede, the P is for predisposing, reinforcing, enabling constructs in education or diagnosis. That is precede. And then the proceed is basically policy, regulatory, and organizational constructs in educational and environmental development. So what does this really mean? We need to do an assessment we need to understand what is really happening in a given population or community. So we can conduct assessments which can be social, epidemiological, and behavioral, and also educational and organizational. Okay, so basically the precede phase is looking at what is really happening, and we don't leave any stone unturned. That's why we look at the social, epidemiological, behavioral, educational, and organizational assessments. The proceed phase looks at the administrative and policy assessment that you really need to do to look for or to conduct so that you can have successful health communication initiatives. So that means that you look at barriers and facilitators to policy implementation. Okay, so you look at implementation, and then last part is the evaluation part of the messages or the campaign that you have conducted. So generally, what we have seen in all those theories is about the fact that you can choose any of the theories to use to craft your messages. You can also combine the theories and come up with an intervention that uses two or more frameworks. Okay, so you need to be very creative. But basically, just know that for you to craft a message, it should be grounded in a framework, a theory, or a model. So what tools do you need? You need an emergency communication plan. Remember that when a crisis happens, it shouldn't get you unaware. You should have a crisis communication plan in place already, such that when the crisis happens, just pick that plan and implement it. You don't need to be a person or an organization that only thinks about how to communicate during crisis when the crisis has just happened. Okay, so every organization, if you are a hospital, what is the communication strategy in a crisis? Longa, Dennis, are you there? Yes? I just want to confirm if Longa Dennis is there. Yes, Longa, please open your mic. I have a question for you. Longa, please. Are you hearing?
Yes, I'm around. I'm trying to.
Yes.
Hello?
So I'm talking about having a crisis, having a crisis communication strategy. You are a student who is doing the module called uh, hospital reputation management. How
Okay.
does a communication strategy for a crisis enhance the reputation of a given hospital?
I think it's somewhat a tough question, but I think effective risk communication strategy will improve the performance of the hospital. I may say, in case like there is a crisis in that hospital where the public will perceive it as if something very hard and maybe it may lead to the collapse of the health facility. And then after putting all the effective strategies in place, and then the public sees that that organization overcome that strategy, I think that will improve the reputation of that organization.
All right, thank you very much. Yes, so an organization which cares about its image or reputation, it needs to have a crisis communication plan. The crisis will emerge from anywhere at any time. It can even emerge at night. So how do you address it? So you need to have the plan. The plan should stipulate who who communicates and how that communication happens and who even approves that communication. The challenge is that what I've seen with the organizations around is that maybe let us take an example of the bottle company, the water bottling company that I talked about. When you have a number of social media posts, people posting their bottles of water with the elements of contaminants on social media, that is a crisis. And usually this message is amplified very fast. Okay, if you post a picture of a water bottle on social media without anything to do with a caption or a message that is alarming, you will not have a lot of reaction. Two people or three people may even like that post of yours. But you make a social media post about water from a company X that is contaminated, and then you say, please avoid buying this type of water because it has contaminants. That post is going to be shared several times. Everyone who sees that post actually wants to either comment or even share, because actually people want to be like caring people. So they want to alert even other people that please avoid this. So when such a thing happens, it means you need to have a crisis communication strategy to address that crisis. Have what you call message maps, which basically helps in visualization of the key messages and the talking points about a particular crisis. Visualization is one of the techniques that are very good in identifying underlying issues that may even skip your mind. So having, let us say, a chart, and then you illustrating that we have COVID-19, what are the key issues, what are the key talking points, how are they linked, and then how you can address them. And then also making sure that you have avenues where you can address people's questions, what we call frequently asked questions, such that you have the answers that are even very consistent. Okay, so if you don't have a question and answer let us say, platforms. It means you'll be repeatedly sending the same message over and over again, yet you can easily say, please, if you want information about this, please go to this end. So that's also very important. So you can craft a message and start disseminating this message, but still that message may not really pick up, or sometimes it can really pick up. The factors responsible are basically related to what we had earlier on talked about. If you remember the theories that we talked about, the key elements or the key constructs of those theories and those models and frameworks mean that if you actually don't address them well, you have a problem with your crisis communication. So make sure that you look at all those elements very well. Risk perception, the trust, transparency, cultural sensitivity, all those factors are very key. So that means that make sure that you are very transparent, you share information openly and in a honest way. You show empathy, be consistent, don't use a lot of jargons. Okay, don't use a lot of jargons. Make sure that you use language that is going to be understood. Timely communication, ensure that people can trust you and communicate in a confident manner. Make sure that the messages have what you call a call to action, which is basically for people to adopt protective behaviors. You need to have a plan on how to mitigate misinformation and rumors. Rumors spread like fire, so you need to have a plan for that. Okay? Prepare, be consistent, be trustful. Be a trusted person. Engage other key stakeholders and utilize their expertise. Empathy and compassion is very important. You can use as many channels as possible, both traditional and the new media channels. Address any misinformation, anxiety, fear. Okay? So always look at that. It's the same concepts that we talked about, the challenges, so we'll not look at that. You can utilize new media in crisis communication. That means that you can use mobile apps, websites, social media platforms, emails, SMSs, and even chat bots. Okay? So during the COVID-19, the government used to release that press release by the Ministry of Health about the numbers of COVID-19. Okay, I don't know how effective that was, and it was during that same time that the website of Ministry of Health South Sudan was actually made. But the issue was during that time it was not really regularly updated, but at least the website was made during that time, and at least the updates were a little bit more frequent. But as time went on, they were not really used. And I'm not very sure if the Ministry of Health South Sudan actually has an active Twitter handle. In Uganda, if you wanted the information on COVID-19 on each day, you just go to the Twitter account. And also the Twitter accounts for WHO, CDC, and others, WHO African region, these were actually active platforms that we're actually using. We now stay in an era of where people want instant information. This is to say that they want to get the news almost instantly. Okay, so people can subscribe uh, to emailing platforms. Okay, if I go to the Ministry of Health website, and then there should be a newsletter about what is happening around issues of health, and then every month they send me that newsletter through email. It could be very important. Okay, so you need to utilize digital communication tools. So if people want information immediately, real time, this is where the Twitter, the streaming platforms are very important. Almost all major health organizations even have YouTube channels. Okay, I'm not very sure if we have the Ministry of Health YouTube channel where it can disseminate information directly there. Okay, these days we have Twitter Spaces. People may not really listen to the radio, but what is being relayed on the radio is directly heard on Twitter Spaces. So that means that for you to reach the wide audience, it means that you need to use all these technologies. Don't assume that when you go to SSBC that is all. When you go to SSBC, make sure that they are streaming on their Facebook page, SSBC Facebook page. They are streaming on the Ministry of Health Facebook page, and they are also connected to the Twitter handle. There is a Twitter space on that program, which is on SSBC. Okay, so it is a television talk show, but it is on YouTube, it is on Facebook, it is on Twitter and other platforms. That is when you can have a wider audience. The updates should be regular. Okay. Social media is what I've talked about. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. These are very important in reaching a wider audience and engagement. People are able to respond to you instantly. Okay, you are on a television talk show about COVID-19, and people are watching you on social media, and they are posting their questions on social media. So later on, the moderator will read the people's comments on social media. Okay, so it amplifies the messages, and the messages reach a wider end. These days, it is communication which we call two-way communication. Don't think that you're the only one who knows. People also know. So you need to listen to them, engage them, and respond to their questions and concerns. Okay. You you need to be aware that you need to listen to people, even ordinary people. There was one time I wrote a letter to an office here, and the person said, "But your title is this, and you're writing to this person. Like, for me to communicate, it doesn't need to it doesn't have to be about my title." Okay, two-way communication. It's not about people's titles. It's what message I have for you. Okay. Sometimes you want to have messages that go viral. Going viral means that everyone is almost watching it, because it is either entertaining, it is either engaging, whatever situation it can be, but everyone is almost watching that, or this having that message. So you can use technology. In my description, I've already stated that you cannot only rely on television and radio and newspapers. The new communication strategies, where I use Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, these are modern communication tools that you can use. They are very good. They are very fast, efficient. You just need to open a Twitter account and you have access to all the people that you want. As long as your message is engaging, people will see it. It will go viral. It doesn't matter how many followers you have. Okay? And if you're only using the radio, only South Sudanese will listen to you. Maybe, most likely. But if you use technology, it's going to cut across borders. For example, our YouTube channel, when we look at the algorithm, like how many people are watching. Of course, the highest number of people who watch our videos on YouTube are South Sudanese. But the next country is actually even, I think, in Europe. Okay? So you really see that we are here in South Sudan, but people who watch our videos are in other countries. That is the global reach. Okay? Interaction, giving people feedback, making sure that the message is tailored. It allows you to collect information in real time. Okay, for example, if you make a tweet now, after 2 hours, you'll be able to see who has seen that message. Okay, so you know that you start to collect data immediately. You don't need to design a questionnaire to even run a complicated software to generate information on how many people actually looked at your message. You make a tweet now, you basically see how many people have seen it, what are the impressions, how many people have retweeted, how many people have liked it. Okay, so that is the benefit of using technology in communication. But of course, technology does not happen without any challenges. And when you put information on Facebook, you're competing with many posts that are demanding for attention of everyone. There are people who like issues to do with football on Facebook, comedy on Facebook, and then for you want to tell people about exercising or putting on a mask. Okay, so like you're competing for attention. So there's a lot of information that is out there, but you need to make sure that your information is very relevant, such that people will be able to pay attention to it. But there is also information that is false, that is circulating on social media and other digital platforms. So how to tackle that is also a huge issue. When COVID-19 happened, if you post about COVID-19, Facebook will tell you that if you want information on COVID-19, visit this website. It could target that is misinformation. If you post something that is not scientifically proven, Facebook could alert the people that this is not proven. Okay, then we have issues to do with digital divide, that not all people are having access to digital tools and technology. So I'm talking about Twitter, I'm talking about YouTube and Facebook, but if you go deep in our states where we don't have network, how can you talk about YouTube? So we have issues there. Then issues of privacy and security, about sensitive health information, and then digital literacy. People have these smartphones, but they don't know how to use them to access digital resources. But we also have people who can use digital platforms for causing harm. But generally, it is very important that you look at using digital tools for communication. Make sure that you are spreading information that is credible, so that people can actually trust you. Be inclusive, that means that you're communicating to a diverse population. Transparency is also very, very key. Safeguarding people's privacy and sensitive information is also very key. You can use both traditional and digital communication tools. Okay, so it's the key issues here. You can use social media for crisis communication. The principles remain the same. Make sure you're transparent, credible, regularly update people, remove if there are any misinformation, handle them, and things like that. If you conclude the health communication program in a crisis, look at how you have handled it, what have you learned, okay, such that you can prepare yourself for the future. So that marks the end of the presentation. If you have any questions,